Alright everyone, it's time for some more midterm analysis. Sort of what, made this channel great in the beginning was the polling analysis and the election predictions. It's harder this time around because you've got a whole slew of House races and we're really not sure. But at this point though, the Republicans' odds of retaining the House, in all honesty, are beginning to slip. It's getting later in the game. In the generic ballot, they are currently 6.8 points behind. That's the first bit of news. Could be worse. It was, almost 13 points for a while. And they're like, oh, yeah, blue wave. I don't think you get a blue wave, but at this point it's becoming more credible that the Democrats pose a threat in the House. Now, it could still be that the polling is systemically wrong. It's possible that that's the case, or higher turnout in registration may not materialize into higher turnout on Election Day, but they gotta be getting nervous. Really, at this point, the ace up the sleeve for the Republicans is one good round of economic news that's going to come out. It's probably going to show better than 5% growth. It's the last attacks that you've seen from the Democrats on the economy, basically, well, wages are still stagnant, those fell through. Number one, because it's not universally the case. Number two, going from not having a job to at least having some sort of working class job is better than nothing. Number three, tax relief and higher consumer confidence. The consumer market has come roaring back to life. These are all good things for the Republicans because they're the engineers of the current economic situation. It's no longer the Obama economy. They tried that line too. It didn't work. Nobody took it as credible. This is the Trumponomics economy. So that's score one for the Republicans, certainly. What I would say is this, though. Beyond that, their other big hope is that North Korea spawns some great peace treaty or something before the election happens. I think Trump would be best served because his approval, second piece of news, is his approval is stubbornly around 43 to 44. It is rising. It's gone up half a point in the last few weeks, but it's not rising, I think, fast enough. He may not get to 45. I think 45 is the magic number at which you have a better than 50-50 chance of retaining the House if you're the Republicans. That odds, while it's still possible, the odds begin to decrease the further down you are, increase above 50-50 the further up you are. If his approval was at 48%, I would say the Republicans will retain the House, as well as make strides in the Senate. In the Senate, though, you've got something else. You get an entire different game. You have a lot of vulnerable Democrats that aren't doing so well. We've got three races that I'm watching closely. One is with Ted Cruz. He has been consistently 5 to 10 points ahead. That's been largely unchanged for several months. I don't think that there's a credible threat to Ted Cruz. I think he wins re-election. So there's one the GOP desperately needed to hold, because one of the big things with the Democrats is they're saying, well, if we can hold these 6 vulnerable seats and eke away at Ted Cruz, we can retake the Senate. It doesn't look like they can do that. So I think their chances in the Senate are less than 1%. For the Democrats, it would be very surprising if they managed to knock Ted Cruz off. Another one is with Rick Scott. He's facing off, I believe he and the Democrat are both non-incumbent, if I remember correctly. This is a race they both desperately want. Rick Scott has consistently been 2 or 3 points ahead. The metric hasn't moved. I haven't seen any poll that shows Rick Scott behind. I think there was one tie many months ago. I think, by and large, he's got like a 75-80% chance of winning. That's fairly safe Republican at this point, although it is technically still competitive. You got to realize that Scott's campaigning right now. I don't think, and if his opponent is an incumbent, I can't remember, then he wouldn't be. So that'd give him an advantage. Now, I don't like Rick Scott or Ted Cruz. Personally, I don't really care if they win, other than, the Senate going blue would be a pretty bad sign of bad things to come economically, because the House and Senate would collude to destroy the economy to get rid of Trump. Maher has openly alluded to this and wanting to do it, so it wouldn't be a good time. I'd rather pay less taxes and have good growth if it's all the same. I think that when a political party begins colluding to destroy the economy, maybe we should consider them treasonous at some point. I would say that the third race that we need to watch, though, is Hawley versus McCaskill. We've got 3 fairly recent polls. One of them shows McCaskill behind slightly. The other 2 show a dead tie. The race could not be closer. If Republican turnout, if the Republicans improve in the generic ballot, Trump's approval rises, you get good economic markers, McCaskill being knocked off would be a major Republican victory. If, however, it goes in the other direction, let's say the economic news comes in well under what they're expecting. North Korea goes back to a war footing, dashes Trump's hopes of peace there. The polling just goes the wrong. McCaskill says something really great, gives a really good speech. That would be a big blow to the Republicans. That's the one that they're drooling looking at this race in Missouri, trying to knock McCaskill off. For a while, there were other high-profile Democrats they were hoping to supplant. I think the closest they can get is McCaskill. She is a high-level Democrat, high enough so that it would be the story of the day if they knock her off, at least with regards to the Senate. If the Democrats then also fail to retake the House, they're in a position where they narrowly lose in the House, and they've got maybe 3 additional losses in the Senate. It could be very close to a Republican supermajority Senate. That's not a blue wave, not by any means. And there are also gubernatorial elections right now that somewhat appear to favor the Republicans. They could come out of this election losing the House, but overall not looking that bad simply because of the good news in the Senate and in the governorships. If that happens, Trump, I think, manages to maintain order. If, however, the Democrats retake the House by a larger margin, knock off a couple governors, maybe break even in the Senate, Trump is going to become a fairly weak president for some time. He would have to definitely generate a lot of extra good economic news and a lot of good foreign policy successes to set up for 2020. He would have an uphill battle. I think he could still do it. I'd still favor him on the basis that I see no viable Democratic candidate to go up against him other than Gillibrand, who, she might not even run. Other than her and a few others, most of the Democrats look very, very weak. It's like people are saying, well, if Joe Biden were to run against him, he'd have 400 electoral points. Yeah, it'd be a wave election, but it wouldn't be Joe Biden winning the election. It'd be Trump getting 400 electoral votes at that point. The Democrats, though, I see them beginning to get slightly cocky. That's not good going into an election because it can depress turnout. Being totally demoralized or being too cocky are both very bad things. You have to, ironically enough, again, to Joe Biden, he's the one that said, well, vote like you're scared. Essentially, vote like you're behind. Trump has alluded to this during the election. He said, well, vote like we're a few votes behind. Vote like it's almost 50-50 and your vote actually counts. And getting people to do that is important. The big problem for the Republicans, I think, is going to be depressed turnout. I don't think turnout will be nearly high enough for a lot of these races. Do they lose enough seats to lose the House, though? That remains to be seen. Nate Silver sees the Democrats taking the House by 7 or 8. I'm not sure it's that rosy for them, especially with the economic news that will come in, with the possibility of good foreign policy successes. In the generic ballot, if the Democrats are not at least 5 points ahead, it becomes problematic for them. They're not too far ahead of that right now. They were 13 points ahead. Now they're only about 8 points ahead. In fact, 7 points ahead, a little bit less, 6.8, I believe. That's not exactly where they want to be. They want to be higher. They're running against Hitler, or so they tell their constituents. They should be like 20 points ahead, right? That could be a problem. Trump's approval, stubbornly below 44. He needs to crack that level and get up above 44 at least for it to be credible, with the Republicans having a good chance of retaining the House. Right now, it's not as good a chance. It's technically below 50-50. My giving of them a higher chance than that was prefaced largely on Trump's popularity growth, plus good economic markers. They probably get the second. Do they get the first? The two are tied together. We have to wait until the next bit of economic news to come in. I believe at the end, in the middle of October, if I remember correctly. When does the next economic report come in? I know it comes in before the election. You're going to get rumblings of it anyway by next month, and it'll be wonderful. He really needs to focus. If I could give Trump advice right now, send Pompeo to North Korea secretly or something. Get it moving over there. Get a declaration of what the stockpile is and some pictures, and then have a summit in D.C. with Kim Jong-un. Your opponents will ramble about you entertaining dictators. Just say, hey, I'm not a standard Republican. I'm not causing a war right now, so shut the fuck up. That's what he should do. As far as the Senate Republicans that are running, or Senate Democrats, you got to pick and choose. The advice to them is pick and choose whether or not to drag Trump in or even talk about him in your race based on how popular he apparently is in your region. A lot of people think that everything's homogenized. This fucked them in 2016 with their analysis. They were assuming that Trump having relatively low overall approval nationwide had something to do with some of these swing states where he was more popular. Hence the Rust Belt going red, befuddling Cenk and Nate Silver and all of these others. So there's a little bit of midterm analysis. I'll be doing a little bit more and probably a little bit more in depth over the coming months. If I can, one thing you've got to understand is that you're held back in some cases by a lack of good polling. Well, if there's no good polling, it's like, what the fuck is the point? And also, never fixate on a single poll. Only use an aggregate. I use RCP. Nate Silver weights things still for some inordinate reason, which is why he constantly comes out with the Democrats well ahead of where they end up being. That's about all. Peace out.